The college, through continuous upgradation, has become a continuous education center. A new knowledge pertaining to farmer field is generated on a regular basis. We at Alamein have a vision of better individuals make better societies. Better societies make better tomorrow, and a better tomorrow definitely makes a better world. Our mission is a grooming arena for the better individuals and pharmacists. Today, in this terrible situation of the pandemic, we are trying to provide quality education to our pharma faculty and students through a webinar series, a first of its kind, on the theme the importance of holistic and interdisciplinary coordination in pharmacy education to counter the global pandemic. In this series, we have already finished with 3 lectures hosted from the Department of Pharmacology, Pharmacochemistry, and Pharmaceutics. Today, we have the 4th lecture from the Department of Quality Assurance. To equip our students and faculty on the topic overview of various global guidelines for the approval of COVID-19 vaccines and medicines, a regulatory approach presented by our respective resource person, Dr. Harrison Michael Jeffrey. I welcome you, sir. I would like to welcome all our participants and our respected principal ma'am, the convener of this webinar series, who is also the Dean Pharmacy, RGHS, Dr. Shobha Rani Hiramat ma'am. She would be joining us soon. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to the HOD of the Quality Assurance Department, Dr. Mubin Ghani. Welcome, ma'am. I now request Dr. Mubin Ghani ma'am to say a few words. Over to you, Mubin ma'am.
Ma'am, unmute. Unmute, ma'am. Yours. Yeah.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Yes, we are meeting here for the 4th lecture of the webinar series. And I welcome, sir, for your presentation. Dr. Harrison Michael Jeffrey, sir, for your presentation, sir. We are awaiting for your presentation. I welcome you, sir, to start with the presentation. Yes.
Unmute your ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. One request to participants, kindly mute yourself and off your videos during the session. Put in all your queries in the chat box. Sir will be answering all your doubts once he finishes without much delay. Over to you, Dr. Lalita N, to introduce our guest speaker of the day. Over to you, Lalita ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Tanushree. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Myself, Dr. Lalita N, Associate Professor in Alamein Pharmacy College. And it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Harrison Michael Jeffrey, an eminent personality, founder and MD of Redimtrix Technology and Solution. Over the past 16 years, Dr. Harrison Michael Jeffrey has been an integral part of strategizing and implementing regulatory business processes worldwide. Having worked with 30 plus pharmaceuticals and medical device companies in providing solutions involving regulatory business processes management, dossier management, regulatory submission, and change management, including data compliances like XEVMPD and IDMP and UDI. He has an in-depth understanding and experience in regulatory aspects of pharmaceutical industry. His experience in standardizing and harmonizing regulatory activities in over a dozen pharmaceutical companies, including initiatives to convert paper-based dossier to electronic formats and supporting dossier management for variation submission, has made him an expert in this field. In his career that has spanned over a decade, he has provided expert guidance in implementation of XVMPD solutions and submission of XEVMPD data, from process definition to data collection, submission management, and acknowledge management. Furthermore, he has imparted his considerable experience in regulatory guidelines and processes to over 2,500 regulatory professionals spanning the globe. He went on to also establish Regulatory Business Solution Center of Excellence to provide business-related service to the pharmaceutical industry. In order to impart his knowledge to future generation, he has also been an internal part of Pharma Advisory Board at the JSS College of Pharmacy. His experience and expertise in the field of regulatory business processes, among the other, garnered through the various positions he has held at leading organizations like Marinlab Software, Empower Research, Aris Globe Software has capitulated him to start his own company called as Redemptrix Technology and Solutions, which today provides innovative solutions for problems faced by the pharmaceutical and medical device industry. Furthermore, they also provide business service to life science companies which require techno-functional expertise to provide optimal business processes execution. As of today, with an in-depth understanding and expansive experience in regulatory aspects of the pharmaceutical and medical device industry, Dr. Harrison Michael Jeffrey stands as a leading light in his field, and we are privileged to have him lead this webinar. Kindly take over the session, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for welcoming me. It's overwhelming to have such a welcome. So thank you very much. And hope my screen is visible
Yes, sir, it is visible.
and I'm audible.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yes, you're
Okay.
audible.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good morning and welcome to this webinar session on regulatory affairs during pandemic era. I think a very pertinent thing today when especially this topic, because it touches everybody's life today on what's going to happen and how it is dealt with. So in this session, I'm going to address three important aspects on this topic. So first, I'm going to introduce you to the global regulatory affairs landscape to for us to understand how the regulatory affairs works, how the industry is globally, and what are the aspects that are looked for as part of regulatory affairs, and what all things go into it. And then we'll look into the COVID-19 pandemic and how it's comparable to other pandemics, and what are the regulatory challenges today in terms of this pandemic. And then I would go on and present to you the different regulatory initiatives and the outcomes of several important regulatory agencies in the world. So these are the three key areas I'm going to talk about today in this session. So first, I would like to lay out to you the regulatory landscape in the globe today. So any country in the world today, we definitely have a government, and we as citizens of the country, we are there in the country. So an important relationship that we have between the government and the citizen is that it's a mutual exchange of things. So the citizens pay taxes, we contribute to the growth of the country, and the government's responsibility is to protect its citizens. So it could be different ways. Whenever we think about protection of a citizen, we always think about army or the infrastructure or the policing and things like that. So one of the important aspects as a quality of life is to have a medicine which is important for health, and that should be safe, and it should when consumed, it should be uh, helping the person get out of the disease. So one of the important function of the government is to ground this um, safety and efficacy of the product, what it reaches the citizens' hands when they are going through a disease or any other ailment. So one of the important aspect is any government in the world today has a regulatory agency which governs the either the medications or the medical devices that are sold in their country. So if that regulation or the control is not there in a country, it just means that the citizens of that country are not protected enough in terms of the medicines and the quality of medicines that are sold and consumed in that country. And the role of regulatory agency is to scrutinize this product that the patients consume, and then have a stringent mechanism to ensure the quality medicines comes in hand to the patient and their health is improved. So in generally, uh, the regulations are provided through regulatory agencies, specifically on how a medicinal product or a medical device should be made of, how it should be manufactured, whether it is efficacious, is it safe, and how it should be sold. Now, the government has a governance over the regulatory agency, and the regulatory agency takes care of these things in any country. And every country has their own regulatory agency, and this is a common setup where we have a regulatory agency in one country, and that regulatory agency controls the controls the regulations of the medicinal product in that country. So in this case, so we in this scenario, we see that some of the regulatory agency, for example, in US, we have FDA. In India, we have CDSCO. So these are regulatory agency that, like this, we have many more, like MHRA for UK, PMDA for Japan, and others. So this is the most common way where one regulatory agency controls the products that are coming in or being sold or being manufactured in their country, and they control those aspects in one particular country. So if we have another landscape which is also available, wherein there could be group of countries, and in that case we have council of countries that is available. And for a council of under the council of countries, we have the regulatory agency which governs a group of countries, and this regulatory agency tries to cover and control the products that are sold or marketed in a group of countries. And although this is a smaller group, definitely this is one of the important aspects in the regulatory landscape that is moving ahead. So we have examples like in the European Union, including European Economic Area, wherein including the European country, we have Liechtenstein, Norway, and Iceland. These countries constitute European Economic Area. So this area, the whole of Europe, including 3 other countries, are governed by European Medicines Agency. And this was a bit of older setup in Europe, wherein European Medicines Agency governs the medications that are sold or manufactured in all of Europe. In the same way, in the recent past, we also have in the Gulf, we have Cooperation Council, wherein this is the council of around 7 Gulf countries, and the regulatory agency there is the Gulf Health Council. So that governs the medications and other medical devices that gets sold in the Gulf region. Again, this is very recently that has been started, and slowly it is picking up in taking the responsibilities from the national level. Now, this is an other important type of regulatory landscape that we see in the world today. And in this setup, each of these countries that we see, these countries are not excluded from having their own regulatory agencies. Still, we have regulatory agency in those countries, which are called as national competent authorities, which govern their own country specific requirements as such, especially language and other aspects. But the regulatory agency of the Council of Countries governs the important aspects in regulating drugs approval in the group of countries. And this aspect, we see that it brings synergism and efficiency in review and approval of the products in the Council of Countries. And also, if we just look at it, if it is the same product and it has to be marketed in a group of countries, we could just imagine that if it is so many regulatory agency, the same content is being reviewed by different regulatory agencies, and there is a loss of time there in terms of approving the product and then having it marketed in the countries. So this is one of the more efficient ways of regulating it and harmonizing regulations in the world today. And if we see as an aspect of how the future is going to be, we could see that this is a trend that is going to happen in the future among other countries in the world. For example, already there is some traction on having a council of African countries in the Africa, and also a similar setup could happen in the future. Maybe, for example, our SAARC countries, we could have a council. So we are a group of countries, so we could have a centralized regulatory agency. So this is a future landscape, how the regulations would be defined and implemented in the place. So now coming on to, we understood how the regulations are made, who governs that, and who takes care of it. Now we look at the product's regulatory life cycle, how a product goes through different phases of its life cycle. So I think many of us will be familiar about these aspects, that we have a drug discovered, the molecule is discovered, the candidate is tested to see stability and how the molecular stability is there, and then the candidate is identified. We have a preclinical phase where the product is tested on animals, and then during the clinical trial phase, it goes through the human trials where it is administered to human beings and evaluated. And there is a phase wherein before it is marketed, it goes through all these data collected during the preclinical and clinical trial phase. This gets reviewed during the marketing authorization phase, and then it is marketed in the country, so which is called as a post-marketing phase. And finally, the product either could be voluntarily withdrawn by the company selling it, or sometimes uh, the product is forced to be terminated by the regulatory agency when it does not meet its requirement, or there are any safety concerns or so. So this is a common product regulatory life cycle. So one of the important aspects here is that when we look at the duration here, we see that the drug discovery until the completion of preclinical phase takes around 3 to 6 years, and then clinical trials take up to 6 to 7 years, and marketing authorization 1 to 2 years. So this is an important aspect in terms of the span of time that is taken until the product reaches the market and the product could be prescribed to the patient. So how the regulatory activities are governed here? Most importantly, this starts off as early as clinical trial phase, marketing authorization phase, and also the post-marketing phase. We have the regulatory governance wherein several submissions have to be made by the uh, company which manufactures the product. It's the company generally is termed as a marketing authorization holder or sponsor during the clinical trial phase. So they need to submit the data with respect to the product and then seek approval from the agency so that it could be marketed, or it could go on with the next phase in its life cycle. So this is very important step, and in some countries it is like especially most of the countries, it is like we have to submit uh, the documentation, uh, and we have to wait for an approval from the regulatory agency before we move ahead with the next phase in the life cycle of a product. However, very few countries and very specific kind of um, uh, medicinal products in few countries requires only a notification, which means we submit the documentation and then we just notify to the authority. That's sufficient. We need not wait for the approval. So this is another scenario how the regulatory submissions work. And again, in terms of the documentation submitted here, these are not one or two documents, I believe everyone knows. So this is a, a larger group of documents. So uh, generally, an interesting historical fact is when penicillin was approved first, after Alexander Fleming discovered it. So the whole dossier, means these documents that we submit are termed as dossier. So uh, the for the first time when the penicillin was approved, it is told that the whole dossier was around 2 to 3 pages, and subsequent to that, because of different regulations, the requirement of data increased because the regulatory agency cannot blindly approve the product, so it had to get all other details. So then the volume of the documents that were required increased, and they were happening in a paper based submission wherein one dossier, you would be astonished to know that one dossier went in one truckload or two truckload of documents. So, and the regulatory agencies, especially FDA and MHRA, those they used to have warehouses to store these documentations, and then the reviewers would go and review those documents. Now, in the recent past, around 10 to 12, 15 years back, these have been changed to an electronic based submission wherein the documents can be submitted in a soft copy in a structured way called ECTD, which is Electronic Common Technical Document. And also in terms of the submissions, previously we had several formats each country's regulatory authority used to ask. This is to some extent controlled and harmonized by ICH through its harmonization process to have similar type of documents to be submitted in a structured format. And it has around 5 modules, and then the documents in those folders would be submitted. So this is just to get you an idea on what the submission happens and how this life cycle flows. Now, coming to the documentation, what does the regulatory agency really look at in terms of the documents, what they want to know about the product before they approve? So this is a most important aspect. So the first one is safety of the product. Again, if you understand the clinical trials, first it is not looked at how in the phase 1 it is not looked at how well the product is curing the disease, but how well it is tolerated by human beings, how well it can be administered without any effect, adverse effect on the human beings. So that is what is evaluated. So the safety is concern of the product. So this is a very important aspect that the regulatory agencies look at. By taking a medication, the patient should not get any other type of effect on their health. So that's the most important concern. And the second thing is efficacy. If the product really is going to cure the disease or an ailment when compared with a placebo. So this is an important, very important aspect as part of the approvals. And these two form an important balance in a regulatory decision making. So if there is a product, for example, a drug for means analgesic, and then there is a severe gastroenteritis as a side effect or adverse event, then most probably that product would be rejected as part of the decision making. However, if the same product is maybe an antiviral HIV drug, or if it is, for example, corona virus, again that virus, then definitely it is going to be approved. So that is where I say it is a balance that is made between the safety and efficacy, wherein the risk and benefits of the product is evaluated by regulatory agency. So this is the core aspect that a regulatory agency looks at as part of the dossier submission to approve a product in a country. And that forms the core. So if that is not there, the rest of the two is not looked at all. So the next thing I think everyone understands, it is the CMC, chemistry, manufacturing, and controls. So it has an important aspect, especially with pandemic, which we'll discuss in a few minutes. So having a product itself is not important. How it is manufactured is an important question that the regulatory agency needs to get a clear answer. So I always take an example of my mother cooking food at home versus if she could cook at a marriage, for example. So the volume matters in terms of manufacturing, and with volume, the quality of the product has a greater impact. So the importance here is regarding how well the company, in terms of its manufacturing capabilities and capacity, can reproduce or manufacture the product, same product, without any variance, with the same quality, and how the organization, which would be a marketing authorization holder, can control these quality aspects is a very important question that the regulatory agencies need to understand before approving. And finally, we have the labeling. So this is not so given importance, especially uh, to a layman in India, suppose, but it takes a huge importance outside the world, especially in the developed countries, wherein what is mentioned on the label has a very important aspect of a drug approval, especially for which indication, which disease the product is indicated, and what are the observed adverse effects in terms of that product. And this label uh, can lead to any extent of um, impacts on the organization who's manufacturing it, and also how the product would be surviving in the future in the market. So basically, what I'm pointing to is, if a product is indicated for a specific disease, it should be administered only for that, not to a different indication. So this is like what is on the label. So we term this as on label indication or labeled indications. And similar way, we have adverse events. Suppose um, there is a product and it has certain adverse events, and it is not printed on the label, then the marketing authorization holder is liable to even pay penalties to the patients if they suffer that. And there are a lot of lawsuits in US or Europe with respect to that. So this is an important regulatory aspect that the regulatory agency look at. So this covers some of the important aspects that we see during these phases until the marketing authorization approval. Once an approval happens, then the product is sold. So now when we move on with the post-marketing phase, so generally when we think about it, we feel that okay, the product is approved and it is marketed in a country, so then all is well, the things are fine. From the product perspective, no. So there are several things that goes on during the post marketing phase of the product. So the most important ones are variations. Variations are like whatever changes in the product are, those have to be submitted to the regulatory authority and get an approval. If it is a major changes, especially impacting the safety and the CMC part, they are major. There could be minor changes, for example, changes in the packaging, the color, the shape, or things like that. So these are variation submissions that happen. And definitely, as part of any product, we can see that uh, although we may think in the hindsight that until the product is approved, there is a major work. After that, no. No, it's an opposite way. After a product is approved, there is several changes that happens to the product. So here there are several changes that keeps happening with respect to the product, especially immediately after its approval, and this requires submissions. And uh, I could say that variation management itself is a huge activity as part of regulatory affairs submissions, because the approved product has to be maintained with the latest changes that the company wants to make and get an approval and implement that. And that's a major headache for any company to maintain that. And then we have commitments, which is generally the company commits to the regulatory agency, telling that, for example, there may be a product, the regulatory agency may not be so satisfied with whatever the clinical trials that have been done, or maybe the packaging, or maybe the labeling. It could be several aspects there. So in cases where it is important that the product, if it is marketed, it is good, that there are so many patients who could be helped by that, but still the regulatory agency has some doubts or not very clear about what it has to decide upon. In those cases, there are commitments with the company gives, and basically it would be a conditional approval that, okay, I am going to approve your product in this country, but in 6 months time you need to provide additional uh, uh, information. It could be bioequivalence or any other studies that that the agency wants, and the company would work on it and do that additional submissions as a commitment that it has given to the regulatory agency. This is also an important aspect, that submissions happens as part of the regulatory submissions. And then we have the safety reporting. So I think you understand that once the so during the clinical trials, if we see maximum, it could be around 3,000 or 3,500 subjects maximum that we may have tested the product on. And among them, there would be some adverse events identified. But once the product gets into the market, the accessibility of that product goes exponentially. So just imagine a product tested on 3,000 or 3,500 subjects, and suddenly it is marketed in India. We are seeing a exponential exposure of the product to the people. So generally, we see any product would have some adverse events identified after its approval and marketing, because it gets exposed to several genotypes, different races, different conditions. So we can expect several adverse events. So these adverse events are reported, and this should be reported to the agency. However, from the regulatory submission aspect, the company should aggregate or collect and collate this information together, and then submit this report to the regulatory agency. Now, already regulatory agency has approved the product based on the risk and benefit that it has seen before the approval, based on the data available from preclinical and clinical trial phase. Now, this safety reporting gives a different or an additional perspective to the regulatory agencies to look at if the product is still valid and still the balance is towards the safety, or safety is compromised with additional information that comes in. So some of the drugs uh, uh, generally, because of safety concerns, after the approval, they have been withdrawn several times. Some of the I think you know, some of the examples are, for example, the latest one, it's COX-2 inhibitors, like rofecoxib, celecoxib, and those coxibs which had adverse event of or effect on ST elevation in ECG when an analgesic is causing cardiac problems. So that was terminated after its approval. And in the past also, we have seen several drugs like that. For example, uh, minoxidil for hypertension caused hairy growth on females, and then it had to be withdrawn or terminated from the market. So safety reporting is an important aspect as a post post marketing phase. And there is also renewals generally happens, and this duration varies from country to country. Most common is around 5 years after initial approval. Again, all the data should be collected in terms of that additional studies, basically the phase 4 studies and other adverse events and other things, other information, the other information the regulatory agency, the company has and submitted to the regulatory agency. And then finally, we have line extension, which is like extending the use of the product for other uses. So other diseases, other conditions. So I think some of the examples are aspirin, uh, although used as analgesic, it was later now approved even for antiplatelet agent for antiplatelet agent for uh, the risk of cardiac events. So this is line extension that can happen. So these are the other types of submissions that happens as part of the regulatory life cycle. So here, when we look at the same principles applies when the approvals for these happen. The safety is evaluated, the efficacy is looked at if there is an impact, the manufacturing. So again, the CMC part, you would also have heard of SUPAC, that is scale up or scale down, scale up and post approval changes. So these aspects are looked at, and labeling changes, what is required. So suppose some new adverse events are reported during this phase, those need to get into the label. So the regulatory agency look into that, and then they try to have that included in the label, and they advise that. And why I emphasize this part is because basically the post marketing period is an important phase wherein, although the product is approved, it is during the post marketing phase that the reality of how the product works, uh, anyone would know. And there is a lot of learning both from the marketing authorization holder and the regulatory agency to take any corrective actions or any changes that are required in the product. So this is about the regulatory landscape that I wanted to give you an overview on, so that we can move ahead to know how the COVID pandemic is, how these are getting impacted. So uh, when we look at the pandemics, again, I believe we all know what a pandemic is. So it is a widespread disease. And this illustration provides us the comparison of volume of deaths and extent of spread of the different pandemics in the world until today. So right from 165 AD till today. So some of the important thing is when we look at bubonic plague, around 200 million people were affected, smallpox 56 million, and the latest one, Spanish flu, and 100 years back at 40 to 50 million. HIV is 25 to 35 million, And now this is our COVID, which stands. This is a numbers from John Hopkins. Um, John Hopkins. So here they have mentioned 696,000 deaths, and this is on August 4th. As of today, it has gone up to 760,000 deaths around the world. Now, when we look at this as a aspect of chronology, we can see that although HIV is 25 to 35 million, we see something that is closer and somewhat had a similar impact as a contagious disease is the Spanish flu here, which happened almost 100 years ago. Now, when we look at the regulatory experience, we can see, means I've just taken analyze some of the regulatory agencies here, not all of them around the world. So we could see that FDA was established uh, around 1900, the first decade. WHO somewhere middle of last century. The CDSCO became fully operational just 2 or 3 decades back. EMA was established 1995. MHRA, although different regulatory agency were there in UK, it was somewhere after 2000, and then PMDA, which is Japanese regulatory agency, also very recently. So when we look at this in a chronological order, we can see that we do not have anything after these modern established regulatory agency that they have gone through something that they have an experience on. For example, if we get some cyclone, we generally compare the past cyclone with the current cyclone and tell that last time it was managed like this. So there is a learning there. But here, when we see the agencies and the age of them or the duration they have been in existence, the only one that we see that is slightly behind the Spanish flu was FDA. Other than that, others are not so much experienced with that. And again, FDA was very young when Spanish flu happened. So the experience of them managing it is very naive. So we can imagine how we are the regulations and whatever is being managed today, how well it would be, because these are all through other experience, and it's a thought process, or it's more of a collaborative discussions and bringing on things. That is how it is. And again, just to indicate here, WHO does not approve any products. So I just indicated here to represent how these health care regulatory agencies are aged. So this gives us a picture on how well we have the regulatory experience in the world today when compared to the pandemics that have happened in the world until today. So now when we look at the past slide that I had, so we can see that these all looked good. These all duration was worthwhile, because it is, whenever a product is approved, we need to be sure about the product, how it is tested, what all it safety is, efficacy is, CMC labeling. All these aspects are very important. Now the challenge is with, when we look at with the background of this pandemic happening and the amount of spread that's happening, this seems too long. So that's the major challenge that today any regulatory agency is facing, or any government is also facing today, because we had a free time, a comfortable comfortable lifetime process that was available. Now in the time of emergency, how these things should be managed, especially the durations. And when the durations are managed, are we going to have some leeway for safety, efficacy, CMC labeling? That's a bigger challenge every regulatory agency has today. And with this context, now I'd like to present to you some of the initiatives different regulatory agency has been taking, and present to you how these works. Again, I have taken US FDA, EMA, and CITESCO as three important regulatory agency, and explain to you what all actions they are taking and what are the outcomes have been until today. So when we look at FDA, there are several regulations as such, and regulation guidelines and documentation FDA has released. But the core important thing is three important things that FDA has done. So one is CTAP as an abbreviation, which is Coronavirus Treatment Acceleration Program. So this is a whole program setup that FDA has done to with an objective that the products, medicinal products and devices which are related to COVID-19 should be approved at the earliest with the accelerated aspect, but still maintaining to an extent whatever is possible in terms of safety, efficacy, and other aspects that it looks at, and also take care of any possible programs that it can do so that this objective is achieved. So this is an important major umbrella, I would call, under which all the regulations and other things have been developed and been released, including other review aspects, SMEs, which is subject matter experts in different areas. They are all being recruited and also be assigned to this initiative. So this is a major initiative by FDA. Again, I could on different um, regulations and documents, but I feel the most important thing that we need to understand is the summary of what exactly FDA is doing. So I am concentrating on those aspects. The second thing is the active program, which means accelerated COVID-19 therapeutic invention and vaccine partnerships. So I think you may be hearing a lot of news in terms of FDA and US manufacturers who are working on vaccines and other aspects. So here, as we saw in the past slide, even regulatory agency are not experienced enough to tell that this is the thing based on which I'm going to approve it. So it requires a better collaboration with the industry or the manufacturer on what aspects of data is required for them to approve the product, especially the vaccines. So this program is helping define that and also come up with endpoints which they would measure so that they can approve the vaccines. So one of a simple example is generally if we look at any vaccine, how well the vaccine's effectiveness would be measured. So generally, in general, when we look at vaccines are antigens for which antibody response is elicited. So in general, for example, if we take a polio or BCG or any other vaccine, generally the regulatory agency will look at how well the antibodies are produced, how well the immune cells are produced, however, or memory cells are produced. Now here in this case, even though antibodies are produced, FDA cannot tell that it can be protective to the patient. So that's not clinically proven. Even whoever is reviewing doesn't know really, is that a fact that based on which he or she can approve that. So here, at least until now, what they have taken it as the clinical endpoint in terms of measuring the effectiveness of vaccine is how effectively the vaccine stops or reduces the infection or the clinically the patient. So this is an important aspects, at least until recently. Even last week FDA is looking at in terms of the vaccine as a clinical endpoint, because of which it can take that into consideration and approve the product. So moving on, the next thing is the emergency use authorization. So here where the experience or the longevity of FDA in the world uh, tells us how it has helped in these regulations. So basically, there is a section 564 of Food Drug and Cosmetic Act of US, through which uh, in emergency cases, the FDA, based on available evidence, it can approve some of the medications with some conditions or timeline until when it would be termed as approved. So I believe we all know uh, what was Trump going back after coming to India. He was trying to means literally scold India for not giving hydroxychloroquine. So that's one of the product. Although there was no clinical trial done on COVID-19 or anything like that, it was approved through one of the emergency use authorizations initially, and then it was withdrawn later. So this is an experience because of the longevity of FDA. This regulation was already there and 3 times amended until 2013, even 16 there was an amendment, and this regulation has been very handy for FDA to approve some of the molecules which could be effective on COVID. So these are the 3 main initiatives or regulations, umbrellas as a whole, through which FDA is operating today. Now, in terms of the current status, this is a uh, enhanced dashboard of FDA, which I'm showcasing to you. So until I think end of July, these are the numbers. So around 570 plus drug development programs are in planning stage, which is pre-IND, and 270 plus trials are being reviewed by FDA, and 2 COVID-19 treatments are currently authorized for emergency use. Here I mention it currently because, as I mentioned just now, some other means hydroxychloroquine was approved and then it was withdrawn. So currently the approved products are remdesivir, which is antiviral, and then Fresenius Kabi Propofen 2%, which is propofol for as an additional therapy during the pulmonary phase of the disease. So these are the 2 that are being approved by FDA. And then the treatment as such currently approved as the treatment is nothing. So there is no approval as such as FDA approved treatment. Whatever approval is based on the emergency use criteria. So some of the time, especially when we read the news on the media, they put this number somewhere here so that we see that okay, it is approved. So actually, some of the larger publications rightly state it as part of emergency use, but others do not and make it more sensational. Now, the other aspect is tests authorized. Again, several tests are being authorized by FDA. 168 molecular test, antibody test, and antigen test. Totally up to 207 tests has been authorized by FDA until today. So this is the regulatory status from the FDA aspect. And in terms of types of treatment, there have been antivirals, cell and gene therapy, immunomodulators, neutralizing antibodies, others, and then combination treatments are being studied. And I think in the end, I will show you how these type of medications helps in COVID and how those regulatory statuses are. Now, coming to EMA, like the uh, FDA, it has set up a COVID-19 EMA pandemic task force. Again, this task force defines the regulations. It is governing that. It is collaborating. EMA and FDA are collaborating very positively in having the right product to be marketed in their respective regions. So the initiatives are very specific and I think very comprehensive to in terms of EMA, at least in terms of our previous slide where I discussed about the duration. So EMA is very specific and has tried to make all possible ways how it can enable any marketing authorization holder to market its product and bring the product to the market at the earliest without having to give some leeway to in terms of other aspects. So one is rapid scientific advice. Basically, before the clinical trial or before the marketing authorization, the approvals, the agency advises the company on what all data is required, what all endpoints that they're looking at. So this generally used to take 40 to 70 days. This they have regulated to have it, to keep it less than 20 days. So which is a huge reduction in timeline there. So the products can get to market faster. Then rapid agreement of PIPs, which stands for Pediatric Investigational Plan. So you'd have seen that with COVID, even children, although not the regular COVID symptoms, but other arterial or vascular symptoms are there. So having a pediatric investigations are important. So this used to be reviewed taking around 120 days. These they want to make it, or they have made it to be 20 days. And then they have come up with a aspect called rolling review, which means in previously it used to be like all the documents were submitted and then they took 10 days after validating the documentations. And here they are having something called as a rolling review, where they have at least 2 cycles of reviews with 7 days each, basically making up to 14 days, which gives a good headway to have the product earlier in the market. And we also have accelerated assessment, basically the final assessment. It used to take 210 days. Now it is planned to have it as less than 150 days. Then we have the extension of indication and extent of marketing authorization. So as we saw, the one of the submissions that generally is done is to extend the usage of the product already approved. So like for example, hydroxychloroquine, this was already approved for malaria in few of the countries and again withdrawn in several countries, but this was already in market. So that is an extent of extending the indication in the for the product. So these type of approvals, the EMA is accelerating and is ready to take those reviews. And then there is a compassionate use of potential treatment. So compassionate use is more like uh, I can just give an example. Means a terminally ill patient, if they require some medication and maybe if it is required that a different medication what the doctor feels or they want to administer, EMA provides a compassionate use authorization. So that also EMA wants to take up. So these are very important initiatives EMA has come up, and definitely it has means, as we say, when it is said with numbers, it's more specific. So EMA's initiatives have been more specific to deal with the delays and the duration, to bring that back into the right frame of things for the pandemic. Now, what is the regulatory status? So EMA also has approved remdesivir as antiviral medication for COVID-19, and also potential marketing authorization. It's almost there in EMA's notification. It's saying it's almost done. It is going to approve dexamethasone. The final reviews are going on. Then there are 38 vaccines, potential vaccines that EMA is reviewing. Again, we saw that rolling reviews, so it is doing that. And 154 COVID-19 treatments. So treatments, whenever it's mentioned, it is like it could be any type of treatment that helps COVID. So those are 154. And then scientific advices, around 17 have been provided by EMA. So this is the current status in terms of EMA. Then CDSCO initiatives, again, we can have it as 7 of them. The first one is a direct access to any developer who says that they have a formula or something that can help, whether it's a drug or a vaccine that helps COVID. So then they have a direct access. They'll be given a personal guidance on what the regulatory path they need to take. There would be a priority review and approval of reprocessed purpose protocols. For example, already the clinical trials are going on, and then they want to include this indication or things like that. They're encouraging that if it is helpful. So they would prioritize these reviews. They want to expedite the reviews and accelerate approvals. And some of the things, for example, even remdesivir, I think CDSCO approved it because it was very confident because FDA has approved it. So foreign authorized products, CDSCO through DCGI is accelerating the approvals. Data requirements is mentioned as abbreviated, deferred, or waived based on case-to-case basis, whichever data that is required, the most important data that it is seeking. Other things could be excluded or abbreviated, no elaboration required. And also it mentions that it will process within 7 days some of the applications for clinical trial, manufacturing, test, analysis, and other applications that get submitted to it. And then we have import license. So one of the important aspects of regulatory governance is, now a product is not manufactured in India, for example, but it is brought from other countries into India and then sold. In those cases, we need to have an import license for that. It requires a registration certificate of whoever is importing. So that would be waived off in certain conditions based on the government's approval, Indian government's approval. So again, some of the marketing authorizations CDSCO has given is remdesivir, favipiravir, again, antiviral approved in Japan, that was approved here as a extended use here in India. Itolizumab, tocilizumab, dexamethasone, hydroxychloroquine. These are some of the products that CDSCO has approved to be used in COVID-19. So this is the status. Again, like EMA and FDA, we do not get so many summarized information in terms of how many clinical trials it is approved and other things. So most importantly, these are the things approved by CDSCO. Now, coming to global clinical trials, on the whole, if we look at, there are around 2,592 ongoing clinical studies around the world. You could see the major concentration is in North America, US, Canada, and Europe. In India, we have okay kind of clinical trials going on. And when we see the early phase 1 clinical studies, basically this helps in emergency approvals, especially in through FDA. So you can see it gets concentrated more in US. So this is going on around 25 of them. 185 phase 1 clinical studies are going on. Again, we always see US and Europe and China are with high numbers there. And 609 phase 2 clinical studies. Again, the same regions take a lead there in terms of number of studies that are going on. And phase 3, it is about 78 in US and 94 in Europe, 10 in India. So there are also other phase 4 studies, comparative studies with other molecules are going on along with these. So these are the clinical trials currently going on, and the regulatory agency around the world are governing them, providing advice to have the product released. This includes both vaccines and other medications that are required. Now, in terms of vaccine candidates, those which are under clinical trial, some are already in phase 3 studies. Those are in total 26. And then in preclinical, there are around 139 preclinical products in preclinical phases that they're going on. And again, this list is these numbers are published by WHO, which keeps a consolidated list on vaccines that are being studied around the world. So now these are the different regulatory aspects that we discussed until now. Now, finally, I would like to give you some insight on how this disease is, and what are the phases, and what are the products that are used as a treatment regime for this condition. So basically, the COVID goes through these 4 phases, which is incubation phase just after infection, the symptomatic phase, early pulmonary phase, and late pulmonary phase. So one of the important aspects here is the number of viral particles, those replicate and increase from the phase 1 to phase 2, and then gradually reduce down. Now the symptomatic phase is where all the symptoms, especially fever, malaise, gastrointestinal symptoms, all these comes up. And especially that's the time our innate immunity kicks in, wherein our body produces innate immune cells, that T cells and others. And then during the early pulmonary phase, basically you would have seen a lot of articles which shows about the respiratory impact on of COVID-19, basically a pneumonitis, COVID-19 pneumonitis kicks in, wherein there is edema and secretions that get collected in the lungs. Along with that, there is a thrombophilia, which means there is more chances of clotting in the blood, and also there is clotting in the lungs. So this is an important aspect here. Again, you could see, rather than virus doing a lot of creating a lot of problems to us. It is after this phase which our body is creating problem for us. So then in the late pulmonary phase, we have macrophage activation and then cytokine storm. So basically, as we all understand, cytokines are the communicating agents between the immune cells. So there is the huge release of cytokines, which is interleukins. So this is this is termed as immune dysregulation, which leads to consolidation, lung and coagulation symptoms. So basically the lungs gets worsened with these phase. And again, here the number indicates the number of days. So from 5th day, it is a symptomatic phase, 11th day, early pulmonary, and 14th day, the late pulmonary phase starts. So here, when we look at the treatment approach, the important aspect is now we had seen remdesivir as an approved in all the regions. So this is a key product that is approved, and this could be used only during the symptomatic phase because that is when the viral replications are happening. There it can have an impact. So the other product, ivermectin, is some other antiviral, again not approved as such, but generally it is used as off-label use by doctors. And hydroxychloroquine, again in India it is approved by CDSCO, but in US it is withdrawn, so it's not used, but they are trying to still prescribe this during this phase. And then vitamin C, as it could have an impact on the immune aspect. So it has been prescribed, and it is prescribed in all phases. And again, there is no approval as such as vitamin C cures COVID-19. Also, for example, the FDA's published a warning letter telling that there is no clinical evidence, but basically in India, at least this regime is followed so that we could utilize its usage. And here in these phase, we could see that there is a immune dysregulation. It starts early on. So this is where the means in India, at least, the methylprednisolone was used, and now after approvals, dexamethasone is also used. And again, this basically suppresses the immune dysregulation so that this immune aspects are controlled. We also have enoxaparin, which is anticoagulant, which is an anti-10A clotting factor. So this actually is approved for pulmonary embolism and edema, so pulmonary hypertension. However, this is prescribed here so that any clots and other things in the lung could be dissolved, and that helps in respiration. And again, this is not approved anywhere. It is used as an off-label use so that we could use that, and the survival of the patient can happen because it relieves the lungs and improves the clinical signs. So this is the current regime that's followed, and this gives an idea how and which products are approved and how some are off-label, some are basically these regimes are used by doctors, especially in India and even abroad. And many means, as we see, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, these are not approved, but they are means as a physician can use even off medication as an off-label use. They are using it. Enoxaparin is also like that. Again, I am personally working on this product now with one of my clients. So these are some of the products are part of this current treatment regime, which is helping cure and make patients' life better or save life in many cases. So Finally, I just want to give a question: how effective would be the COVID-19 vaccines? So we have seen some places like actually what EMA would review for 10 days, they are telling that they will review in 20 days or 30 days or 40 days. So how effective the COVID-19 vaccine would be? Or even FDA is accelerating. Cedesco is also accelerating. So how effective the COVID-19 vaccines would be? Again, a very important question that comes to our mind. And the second aspect, which is also important, is that everyone want, or we are thinking that when the vaccine would be approved so that we get the vaccine, the most important aspect that when we think about it is, when do the world have the capacity to manufacture with quality so many doses of vaccines, whichever is developed, so that it could be harmonized in a harmonized way, distributed around the world. So definitely this is an important aspect which we are not thinking now, but that basically I think somewhere would come up in the future on who should get what dose and things like that, because definitely the developed countries, they would have their larger hands to say that they may require the vaccines first and then give it to developed countries or things like that. So this is an important socio-political aspect that can come in terms of dosage. Now, in terms of effectiveness, with whatever timelines that is available, this is a pertinent question. So uh, 4 days back, there was a webinar with Stephen Hans, who's a commissioner of FDA. Means he's like the head of FDA. So his statement is, realistically, whichever vaccine that gets approved, it would be effective 50%. They do not see that if a vaccine is taken 100%, the person would not develop clinical symptoms or so, because this is an accelerated way that the approvals are happening. There has been a lot of efforts put in, still without compromising the factors that the agencies are looking at, but still because of the inexperience that the whole world has with respect to this condition. So realistically, it is good to think that even the vaccine comes out, it is going to be 50% effective. So we cannot expect it to be something like a polio drops that we were taking, or a BCG, where once taken we used to feel that, yes, I'm not going to get these diseases henceforth. So this is realistically 50%. Again, every regulatory organization, again, Stephen Hans also mentions in his webinar that the most optimistic way how any regulatory agencies are looking at today is that they want to learn from the experience and reduce as much as possible the risk, and keep that risk benefit balance in a more realistic and positive way, learn from this and then implement it. That is where I talked about post approval phase, where different submissions and all happen. So what the regulatory agencies are looking at is, based on the safety profile and the efficacy, they are going to approve it, and then they would provide further guidances to everyone, whoever have their product has been approved, to scrutinize those products, and as a post approval activity, based on the learnings, try to prune those products and then have them in the world. So this is what the world is going to be, and the regulatory landscape has been. And again, as you know, the challenges are there. And I think there's a quote that the hard times bring in best in everyone. So it is the hard time that is bringing best out of regulatory agency, best out of the companies that are manufacturing, and whoever are involved in the pharma or medical device domain. So thank you for attending this. If there are any questions, I could take.
Yes,
it.
sir. Thank you, Dr. Harrison, for such an informative and interesting topic, which is the actual need of the hour, sir. We are all talking about vaccines coming out here and there, and so much information you have given us. I would now like to welcome our respected principal, ma'am, who has joined us a little way back for the seminar. She's also the convener of this seminar webinar series. She is the Dean Pharmacy RGHS, Dr. Shobha Rani Hiramat, ma'am. Ma'am, I would request you to speak a few words.
Thank you, Tanushree. Yeah. So, hello, Dr. Harrison. I joined in a little late, but nevertheless, I heard when you were talking about the regulatory affairs during pandemic era, I joined in, and I really found your presentation very, very informative. And I think so it shows how much effort you have taken to collect the information and then put it, in a presentation for us. It is not simple. The amount of the in-depth information that he has collected and given, a lot of effort has gone in that. So I really thank you for that, sir. And he has given really a lot of information about FDA COVID-19 initiatives, FDA COVID-19 regulatory status. Then EMA also, he has told EMA COVID-19 initiatives, EMA COVID-19 regulatory status. And also he has touched upon the CDSCO. So CDSCO COVID-19 initiatives and even the procedures, I was very impressed. He's given the stepwise procedures, like how it happens, how it is approved, the regulatory aspects in the CDSCO, and how the medicines get approved from the CDSCO. And he has also touched upon the global clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and the current treatment regimens also. And of course, as Tanushree mentioned about the vaccines, it's always a big question mark, how effective are the vaccines? So he has touched upon that aspect also. And it really, we are very impressed with your in-depth knowledge and experience, which has led to this much of information being given to us. And thank you once again from the entire team of Al-Amin College of Pharmacy for sparing your valuable time and enlightening all the people who have logged in today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I would request all the participants to pour in your questions in the chat box. One more request, all the participants kindly fill the feedback form before leaving the meeting, the link of which will be provided in your chat box. It's over to you, Mrs. Tejaswini, for the question answer interactive session. Over to you, Tejaswini.
Thank you, Tanushree ma'am. A very good afternoon to one and all. Myself, Tejaswini, Assistant Professor in the Department of Quality Assurance, Al-Amin College of Pharmacy, is here for the questionnaire session. Here comes with the first question. It is from Mr. Rajesh. Sir, you just want to know how much herbal formulation effective is in this pandemic. How much time it takes to build up immunity?
Yeah. Thank you, Rajesh, for the question. So the clinical trials which I've listed out. So there are several clinical trials going into the herbal formulation stream also, where we are looking at, and also not only herbal, even other therapies, which includes, for example, yoga and other pranayam and other things. There are clinical trials going on. So it would be good if you could look at the clinicaltrial.gov for the updates there where it is present. However, if we look at more from the mechanism of action, basically we looked at the treatment regimen and also how the disease is progressing. So the important aspect is, one, either the herbal medicine has to have an antiviral effect, which looks means generally as such, whatever we have seen, we do not see so much of antiviral properties in any herbal medicine until today, because otherwise we would have used most of them before. And also one of the aspect is why do we use alcohol as a antiseptic? Means we have chlorhexidine and other things. Basically, what we see is that the virus is killed more when there is where there is an oxidative effect on the virus. So basically, looks like that the herbal formulation means just like that. We can't say that much. And then in terms of immunity building, that's where I think most of the mechanism of action of the herbal medicine would be basically wherein it promotes immune functions. So again, the effectiveness I've not done any meta-analysis on that, but looks more like whatever herbal formulations that are looked up to, those are all the clinical endpoints looked up is towards how immune modulatory functions the herbal medicine has rather than antiviral. So this is what I would like to say here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your. Here comes with another question that is from Kavya Reddy. Whether arsenic album 30 is effective to protect from infection?
This arsenic album is homeopathy, I think, isn't it?
Again, going by the terminology, it looks like that. Again, I really have not looked much into each of the molecule, and I'm not tracking that much. I'm more tracking from how the approvals are, or based on what the products are approved. At least from that aspect, I can say that the effectiveness of arsenic album, I have not seen any studies showing that.
I think arsenic album is in homeopathic medicine, I think. I mean, that's
Yeah,
what I think. No, appears like homeopathy.
It's a homeopathic medicine. Yeah, in immunomodulator. It is also an immunomodulator.
Yeah, it's an immunomodulator. Yes, it is used to have increased immunity. Tejaswini, are you with us? I think there's a little technical glitch on Tejaswini's side. Somehow we are not able to link her. Just a few minutes, sir.
I see one more question
Yes.
from Pramod.
Please you answer, sir.
I'll take that. So aspirin use in thrombosis. So in terms of thrombosis, yes, generally when we look at cardiocoagulatory disorders, yes, aspirin has been used, wherein the coagulation is happening in the blood vessels where there is a damage to the arterial wall, and then there is a coagulation at the atheroma which is formed and things like that. So aspirin helps in preventing thrombosis there, again through its COX inhibitory action. However, here in COVID-19, the thrombosis is more in terms of coagulation in the lungs, which is more of the when we see the pulmonary circulation, the circulation in the lungs is decreased, because of which there is a basically even pulmonary edema, and then there is a coagulation. So aspirin use is not I do not see anybody doing some study on aspirin use, because basically aspirin is more of a preventive than a corrective drug there. So that is where we could see enoxaparin is used there, which has been helpful in reducing those coagulation means as an anticoagulating agent there, and helping reduce pulmonary embolism, pulmonary edema, and things like that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving the information. Here one more question from Mr. Athar Gauss Mastane. What is the status of the vaccine from Russia, Secovac, being available in India from August 12, or it will be available from 12th August?
Yeah, so this is an interesting news that we are seeing. I think especially the smaller publications are publishing it. I see that, again, I think with the presentation, I will share you the a consolidated list of vaccine that WHO is publishing. So there I do not see this vaccine. So I'm a bit skeptical about it. Again, because it's Russia, we do not know some of the times, maybe globally, those things, those information, Russia may not have shared it or so, although it has a collaborative program with EMA. So I would look at this news as more skeptical until it actually is released or like that, because I don't see this vaccine name in the WHO list.
Well, thank you, sir. Here is one more question. What are the major differences in the domestic and international dossier preparation?
Yeah, so basically I would say that at least several modules are harmonized as of today because of ICH guidelines. So the major changes I would say is more in terms of the granularity of details, and also the module 1 definitely it changes because that's regional. Meanwhile, the other major change is the format in which the submissions are happening, like paper-based, very few countries, and then in terms of ECTD, many have adapted, and there is also NIS format, which some of the countries are also using. So that's what I see important differences. Otherwise, I do not see as a content-wise there is a major difference. And also one of the important aspect I would like to share with everybody here is that when we look at dossiers and difference in dossiers, maybe 20 years back is entirely different than the dossier that we see today. So what's happening is any pharma company that we see, generally they have a global presence. Like definitely they try to market their product in as many countries as possible. So generally what happens is the core documentation, so dossier documents, it is prepared centrally because it can be reused in other countries as well. So although there may be slight differences, it means again module 1 is the major difference there. So generally operationally the companies prepare this core document together, and then they just have the module 1 different. So in that, with that perspective, what I see is that, hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
okay. So with that thing, what I see is that we have this we have the dossiers basically being similar, if not for regulation purpose, but from operational purpose, they are having that in a similar format, and then they are using it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Comes with one more question. Does Indian drug store has any regulation? Is there any holistic approach can be proven to be effective?
Hello.
Sorry.
Hello.
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 Yes,
This is a question. I am Xavier Amalraj from.
Hello. Sorry, madam, I did not get that question. Could you please repeat it?
I'll repeat, sir. Does Indian drug store has any regulation? Mr. Amalraj sir is asking.
Yes, means the regulations means especially from the immune response perspective. Basically, for immune responses, basically what I see is like we have means again regulations are more generic based on what the type of drugs they are. If they are small molecules, we have a type of regulation, and then we have biologics or biosimilars, we have regulations. So I see a connection there. Otherwise, I do not see specifically like what immune modulators should have. Like that, we do not have it, but I see a connection in terms of molecules that help in immune modulation.
Thank you, sir. Here comes with one more question. By the investment point of view, how much will be the impact on the phase 4 clinical trials? Will the companies think of withdrawal if it is not that effective on any age group?
Sorry, madam, if you could repeat it.
I'll repeat once again. By the investment point of view, how much will be the impact on the phase 4 clinical trials? Will the companies think of withdrawal if it is not that effective on any age group?
Yeah, so this is a good question. So yes, it's not only from an ethical perspective of effectiveness. So it also goes with the business aspect of effectiveness. So basically what happens is there are so many withdrawals of the products also have happened, not because of the safety profile, but maybe because of his law, because it's not that effective. Basically the prescription of those medication itself is been low, and then maintaining that product in the market for the company would cost them more, so that results in the withdrawal. So that would be the aspect how companies withdraw rather than ethically they do. Means if something is not effective and still somebody is prescribing, I do not think the companies go ethically and say that, yeah, my product is not working, I will withdraw it.
Thank you, sir. Here is one more question from Mr. Vinay Pandit. How can the holistic approach can be proven to be effective?
Yeah, so one of the important aspects when in a clinical trial data is basically we know that how effective in a clinical trial study, how effective is the product with respect to the placebo. That's what we are measuring. So as a holistic way, again, holistic approach, there are several trials being done, and again means again, as we all know, that effectiveness should be statistically significant as part of the clinical trial results, and that's an important point there. And again, the means at least from COVID-19 perspective, when we look at, there are so many holistic approaches been tried in clinical trials. So I see some positives there. Again, when we look at the mechanism of data comparison that we do, so means basically we have 4 groups, like patients who were administered with the medicine and were cured, patients who were administered and they were not cured, and patients who were administered with placebo not cured, and then the 4th group, which is who were administered with placebo but still cured. So this 4th group, I'm very interested in studying it, because when it is a placebo, how someone got cured. So I think that's a very important study that anybody could do as a meta-analysis. But as of today, not much studies are done, but I see that holistic approach could bring in these aspects, throw some more light there.
Thank you very much, sir. Here is one more question from Hemalata. Is that vaccines are given according to the age like pediatrics and geriatrics?
Definitely, the vaccinations will have a specific dosage criteria. So again, when we see the vaccines for COVID today, there are DNA fragments, RNA fragments, attenuated. I don't see any live attenuated like polio. Um, uh, Everybody are seeing attenuated. So there are different ways how the antigens can be administered. So these are, and also protein fragments. These are 4 types of vaccine types that we see those are undergoing clinical trials. So when we look at that aspect, definitely there would be some dosage considerations between the different age groups, because it would have viral load in some aspect. So definitely we will have some dosage related guidelines, or means in the terms, the posology for what should be administered for what which age group. That is definitely going to be seen. And as I described previously in the EMA's aspect, so that is also a reason why they are accelerating the pediatric investigational plan, where they're also administering some of the things to pediatric age group, and that's a specific trials and investigations that have to be done.
Thank you, sir. Here comes with another question from Mr. Pramod. Is there any booster dose of vaccines?
Yeah, I think a very good question here. So one of the recent studies published in NEGM is that after the initial exposure of a patient to the COVID-19 virus, later the immune response continues. After the 3rd month, there is a depletion in the immune response. So this is one of the study which shows like that. And basically after 6 months, it's going to be still more or less. So basically that's one of the reason why we did not have some of the vaccines for other viruses also. If we look at some of the flu virus vaccines. So basically in Europe especially, there are several flu vaccines that people take. And the means I have worked with one of my customers wherein they manufacture vaccines for flu, and every year they have a new formulation for the same product with a different strain of the flu. So similarly, we see that uh, that for COVID-19, after 3 months, whoever is infected, their immune responses deplete a bit. So definitely, it looks like that there could be some booster doses that may be required after 6 months or so. Again, this is one of an important aspect that everybody is focusing, especially from the regulatory agency's perspective, to approve which dose and duration they need to approve it for. Because once they approve, they cannot tell that, okay, this vaccine is approved for this condition, but they also have to approve the uh, the the subsequent uh, 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 dosages that are required as a booster dose to incite immune responses.
Thank you, sir. Here comes with the last question. That is from Eva Singh. Is thrombolytic agent like TPA will be added in regimen to treat COVID-19 patients as it has shown beneficial effects in COVID patients?
Yeah, means again, really speaking, means when I showed some of the regulatory statuses, FDA wise or EMA wise, you could see that number of COVID-19 treatments that have been reviewed or approved. So treatments in the sense they are not directly impacting COVID, but they are supporting the COVID condition. So definitely the thing is any anticoagulating agents could be a probable agent that could be used in the um, in the uh, uh, in the treatment of COVID-19, especially when we saw that the late pulmonary phase where there is a consolidation in the lungs, definitely that anticoagulants or thrombolytic agents help there. So that could be administered. However, whatever I have shown the regime in the slide, that's the last slide in my presentation. So that's the treatment regime that we means followed in AIMS as of today, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and many of the physicians in US also agreed to those regime. So now one of the important aspect is that enoxaparin has been very good product, especially in terms of pulmonary thrombosis and hypertension, and it is not approved today, but it was approved I think in 2008 if I'm not wrong. So it has a longer it has been used for long for not only this pulmonary hypertension and embolism, but also as an interarterial line during dialysis to prevent clots. So that gives more confidence to the physician to use it. And again, when we are looking at these kind of agents that helps in the treatment, we need to also remember that these are not an approved indication for these. These are more like a off-label use that physicians are using because it benefits the COVID-19 patients.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your valuable answers. Here comes to an end with the questionnaire session. Over to Tanushree ma'am.
Thank you, Mrs. Tejaswini. I would now invite the HOD of the QA department, Dr. Mubin Ghani ma'am, to summarize the session. Over to you, Dr. Mubin Ghani ma'am.
Hello, Tanushree. Hello.
Yeah, ma'am, you're audible now, ma'am. You can summarize the session now.
Yes. Okay. Hello, sir.
Hello, madam.
Yes. Sir, I would like to thank you, sir, for making such good and informative presentation and lecture regarding the regulatory aspects taking place around the country and the world. I personally wish to express thanks, sir. I'm also very grateful, sir, that you took the time out of your busy schedule to present this webinar series lectures on regulatory affairs during pandemic era. Sir, another thing is I would like to say that we have given a lot of information on the main three aspects, that is global regulatory agencies landscape and the regulatory challenges today in this pandemic, and the initiatives and the regulatory status of different regulatory agencies in the world. Sir, this you have also highlighted the role of regulatory agencies in providing quality medicine and quality products to people in the country and to track the movement of medicinal products in the country and in the Council of Countries. Sir, another thing is you have also given about the lifestyle of regulatory regulatory life cycle of products, which starts from drug discovery to preclinical, clinical trials, market authentication, then post-marketing, and also the withdrawal and approval process. You have also mentioned about the importance of documentation of important parameters like safety and efficacy of products for getting approval from the regulatory agency. Sir, you have also mentioned about the post-marketing aspects like the chemistry, manufacturing controls, labeling, variation, commitment, safety reporting, and renewal process of the products. Sir, you have also mentioned about the overview of different pandemics of the world in earlier years until today. And you have given the regulatory agencies initiatives for COVID-19. So you have given the information about the CTAP, Active, EUA, and you have also mentioned about the different important regulatory agencies in the world, FDA, and what are the regulatory status of FDA, what are the initiatives of FDA, and you have also mentioned the initiatives and the regulatory aspects of EMA and the Indian agency, that is CDSCO. Their initiatives and also their regulatory status, what the different drugs we use, and you have mentioned about the ongoing clinical studies in the world also, where many products are there in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and many vaccines are also under preclinical and clinical trials. Sir, you have also discussed about the current treatment regimen during the different stages of COVID-19 infection. Sir, another thing is you have given a lot of information, and this information will be very helpful for QA and regulatory affairs people who are working in these industries. Sir, I personally wish to express my gratitude to you, sir, for sharing your experience and extensive knowledge about this topic, that is the in this regulatory affairs during this pandemic era. I thank you once again, sir. I believe you give training to students, training to professionals. Your company, you are the founder and MD of Redipix Tech Bangalore. So I believe you give training to professionals regarding regulatory aspects. Can you just tell us briefly about how it goes, sir? Whether you require some criteria, or you give training to students, or you give some certificate course, or such things, sir? What do you do in your company?
Yeah.
Can
So,
you just tell us?
actually, I have been working in this industry from past 12 to 14 years. And before that, I was doing my clinical practice. So yes, I have been involved in training peoples around the globe. I think I have trained close to 15 to 16,000 people around the world on some of the regulations, some of that are related to regulatory aspects and safety, also safety, and so more of system domain. So one of the important challenges in world today is whoever are developing systems, they're more technical in terms of the system. Whoever are the domain, they do not understand the system. So I got an opportunity to do this. I have traveled around the world and providing this trainings everywhere. Meanwhile, yes, I have been involved in providing some of the sessions. I like to be academically involved, so I have been involved with a few of the organizations like JSS. I also have been training some of the students in Maharashtra and things like that. I feel privileged to help whoever wants to learn these aspects. And again, I believe in we learn more when we try to teach more, because we need to be more perfect when we are telling something else. So that keeps me occupied, and also that challenges me more, because I feel one of my teacher telling me that on a day of Viva, he used to tell that on a day of Viva, the student is more knowledgeable than the teacher. So teachers should be prepared more. So I feel that keeps me pumped up. And again, as part of this, means this one was in my previous organization that I worked, but I feel that especially in the world today, there are many organizations which I have been uh, part of. For example, there is a group called RAPS, Regulatory Affairs Professional Society, DIA, and other things. Uh, so I have been a member, but what happens is all those requires fee to be paid, membership to be paid, and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
because now recently I have started my own organization, my vision is that I need to create a group wherein freely whoever wants to have a knowledge can join and then attend and learn things, because there is a huge potential around the world for pharma and medical devices and all these technicalities. Some of the times, especially academically, we cannot include all those things in syllabus. That goes into personal interests also, so those things could be learned there, is my thought. Again, I have means Redemptrix is my company. Meanwhile, that program I've termed is as Redemptrix Enlight, as a brand through which I do trainings and give some help and guidance to students also.
So you require a PG with regulatory affairs for that? Or any other student who is interested can?
I think anybody with pharma background, I think here in India, we do not have more of medical devices courses. Again, pharma graduates or postgraduates, means in my previous organization also, there are pharma graduates, postgraduates who are been part of my team. That's how in India that has been. There is no specialized course for medical device regulations and things like that, which would be good. Outside India, it is there. So I do not see like only postgraduates are required. Others also could learn, because I think that is how around the world also it has been. Again, regulatory part, especially I see that, especially outside India, even lawyers have tried to work in regulatory, because that is also law. So I think when people from pharma get into it, they need to get a flavor of law. But when lawyers and whoever studied law come in, they need to learn more of products and things. Again, I see that to adapt from a pharma to law, little bit of knowing laws is easier than the other way around.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So we feel privileged to have you, sir. You have an in-depth knowledge in regulatory affairs, and you're leading a company which gives solutions to pharmaceutical and medical industry. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Thank you, everyone.
Over to Tanushree. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. I would now hand over the session.
Yes.
Yeah, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, madam.
Yes, Tanushree, you are audible.
Thank you, ma'am. And I would now hand over the session to Mrs. Tejaswini to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Myself, Tejaswini, Assistant Professor in the QA Department of Alamin College of Pharmacy, is here to deliver the vote of thanks of today's webinar. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks for the webinar. I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to the Honorable Speaker of the Day, Dr. Harrison Michael Jaffrey, who has given such a wonderful talk and took out valuable time of his busy schedule. I sincerely thank Dr. Shobha Rani Iramat, Dean Pharmacy, RGHS, Principal, Alamin College of Pharmacy, and the convener of the webinar. I would like to thank Dr. Mubin Ghani, HOD, QA Department, for supporting me in conducting this seminar. I would like to thank Dr. Lalita, who has given a nice introduction about the honorable speaker. I must mention my deep sense of appreciation for organizing committee of the webinar series, that is Dr. Preeti Karwa, Mr. Rakesh Panda, and Mrs. Tanushree Chakraborty for making the seminar very successful. I especially like to thank our technical admin, Mr. Faisal sir, for helping out all of us to conduct this webinar without any technical glitch. As no program can become successful with a single person, I extend my sincere thanks to our faculty and dear participants for their active participation. Thank you one and all once again. Over to Tanushree ma'am.
Thank you, Tejaswini. So we have come to the end of another enriching lecture of this webinar series. Participants, kindly fill your feedback form, the link of which has been provided in the chat box before leaving the meeting. You will receive your e-certificates within 5 working days. Our next lectures on this webinar series will be on the 12th and 13th August. I repeat, it is on 12th and 13th of August. 2 lectures, one after the other. The notification and the invitation for the same will be rolled out soon. Till then, be safe, stay at home. Thank you all. This is Tanushree taking your leave. See you next week on Wednesday. Till then, bye from all of us at Al-Amin College of Pharmacy. Bye and be safe. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
It was a good session.
Yeah, ma'am. One of the good session. Yeah.
Very informative.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
12th is whose session? 12th?
12th, ma'am, cognosy department.
Pharmacy department.
13th is Dr.
And
Manish.
13th is pharmacy practice.
Okay, then, bye.
Okay, ma'am. Bye.
Yeah. Bye, ma'am.
Bye, ma'am.
Thank you, Lalita, ma'am. Thank you, Sir Tejaswini,
Thank you,
ma'am.
Tejaswini. Thank you, Lalita, ma'am. Only
Thank you, sir. Thank you, 3 of you.
Tejaswini, ma'am, you are sitting on helicopter or what?
No.
Rakesh, 44 participants are there.
Rakesh,
Sitting on chair only.
Rakesh,
कौन बोला?
मैं
Kalpana,
कल्पना बोल रही हूँ।
Kalpana चमक रही है.
Why you got that doubt, sir?
Lot of disturbance.
Lot of disturbance from
feedback form.
Tejaswini.
Oh, chat box में. Chat box में.
हाँ,
Not audible.
yeah, got.
Hello. So why you got that doubt?
Lot of disturbance, ma'am, due to your mobile.
Yes, it was quite disturbing.
Oh, maybe network issue.
Yeah.
Questions are clear, no, ma'am? You got
Ah.
Yeah. Sir was asking you again, no? 2-3 times he was not clear, so he clarified.
Now also
That time, yeah.
Now also the dubbing sound is coming actually.
Hey, Tanushree,
Hey,
हो गया?
Kalpana.
happy
तू
birthday.
चिल्ला क्यों रही है माइक? हाँ, थैंक यू यार. तू माइक पे
ए?
चिल्ला क्यों रही है? बता.
स्पेशल
आराम
बर्थडे
से।
फीलिंग आना है ना तनुश्री मैम.
हाँ?
तनुश्री को स्पेशल बर्थडे फीलिंग आना है ना लंच मेट की तरफ से.
मुझे जोर से बोल रही है मैं माइक के सामने.
I'm going to end meeting.
Please, please,
Bye,
please.
sir. Bye.
End.